The most popular post on our Wild West Picks in 2025 features the iconic 1885 image of Sitting Bull, one of the most celebrated figures of the Wild West. The great Hunkpapa Lakota spiritual leader and warrior, photographed after years of exile in Canada, embodied Native American resistance and became a widely recognized face of the 19th century. Red Blanket, a Cheyenne warrior, photographed between 1880 and 1900. The Cheyenne people were among the most fierce defenders of their lands on the Great Plains, resisting American expansion through the Sand Creek Massacre of 1864 and beyond. This image captures a warrior whose nation endured devastating losses in frontier warfare. On January 6, 1919, Theodore Roosevelt died in his sleep at his Sagamore Hill retreat in New York at age 60. The former president, cowboy, conservationist, and war hero, was one of the most complete and influential men the American West produced, leaving a lasting legacy across conservation, politics, and American cultural identity. View of Deadwood in the Dakota Territory in 1877, 1 year after the chaotic arrival of gold prospectors. The town had grown at a dizzying pace, transforming from an improvised tent camp into a settlement with streets, permanent buildings, and a diverse population of adventurers, workers, merchants, and every manner of frontier character. Buffalo soldiers of the 25th Infantry Regiment photographed at Fort Keogh, Montana in 1890. Buffalo Soldiers were African-American regiments that served with distinction in the Indian Wars following the Civil War. They received their nickname from the native warriors they faced, a reference to their strength and fighting courage. Wild Bill Hickok, before his fame as a gunfighter, photographed around the 1860s. James Butler Hickok had not yet accumulated the long list of killings that would make him legendary. This youthful image shows the man before the legend, a scout and frontiersman who would become the most famous pistolier of the American Wild West. George Armstrong Custer and Bloody Knife, kneeling at left, Custer's favorite Indian scout, photographed around 1876. Bloody Knife, son of an Arikara father and a Hunkpapa Lakota mother, was one of the Army's most valuable scouts and died alongside Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn in June of 1876. Interior of the Sawtell Ranch at Henry's Lake, Fremont County, Idaho, in 1872. Gilman Sawtell was one of the first settlers to establish a permanent ranch near what would become Yellowstone National Park. His property served as a resupply point for scientific and commercial expeditions exploring the region. Wyatt Earp photographed later in life in San Francisco in 1926 at age 78. The legendary lawman, who survived decades of confrontations in the Wild West, spent his final years in California consulting with Hollywood screenwriters who sought to portray his extraordinary life on the screens of the burgeoning American film industry. The Earp brothers photographed together, Virgil, age 38, at left, Wyatt, age 33, at center, and Morgan, age 30, at right. This rare image captures the three brothers who starred in the most famous gunfight of the American Wild West, the OK Corral in Tombstone, in October 1881, a confrontation that lasted only 30 seconds. Virgil Earp, photographed between 1890 and 1905. The eldest Earp brother was the official town marshal of Tombstone during the period of the famous OK Corral gunfight. In December 1881, he was seriously injured in an ambush set by the cowboys, permanently losing partial use of his left arm for the rest of his life. Comanche the horse, the only living being found on Custer's battlefield after the Little Bighorn Massacre on June 25, 1876. Captain Miles Keogh's horse survived gravely wounded and was preserved as a national symbol of endurance. After his death, he was taxidermied and can still be seen in a Kansas museum today. Annie Oakley at the Baker Art Gallery in Columbus, Ohio, around 1880. Phoebe Ann Moses, whose stage name was Annie Oakley, was the greatest marksman the world has ever known. Born in Ohio in 1860, she became world famous through Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, thrilling audiences on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. Jesse James at age 17, around 1864, during the Civil War. James had joined Quantrill's Confederate guerrillas at age 16, participating in brutal massacres. After the war, he led the James Younger Gang in a series of bank and train robberies that made him the most famous outlaw in American history and a folk hero to many. A stagecoach crosses a bridge in Silverton, Colorado in 1890. Silverton was one of Colorado's major silver mining towns, connected to larger cities by the dangerous mountain roads traveled by stagecoaches. The arrival of the narrow-gauge railroad in 1882 transformed and profoundly modernized the remote and prosperous region. A horse bucks and throws its rider in Montana in a photograph by Leighton Huffman around 1898. Huffman was one of the most important photographers of the Wild West, documenting cowboys, indigenous people, and the Montana landscape with extraordinary artistic talent. His images are today considered priceless historical documents. A logging crew camped near Lyonsville, California, around 1880. The timber industry was fundamental to the development of the American West, supplying building materials for cities like San Francisco and railroad ties for the expanding transcontinental network. Loggers lived in difficult conditions in remote mountain camps. Pikes Peak Avenue in Colorado Springs, Colorado, in the late 1870s. Colorado Springs was founded in 1871 by General William Palmer with the intention of creating a planned and refined city in the West. Its proximity to Pikes Peak, the most famous mountain in the Rockies, attracted wealthy tourists and settlers from the east. The Bob Saloon in Miles City, Montana, in 1880. Miles City emerged as a military outpost and later became an important cattle trade center in Montana. The Bob Saloon was one of many establishments serving a mixed population of soldiers, cowboys, and merchants who frequented the growing town along the Tongue River. The California Store in Tombstone, Arizona, in 1880. Commerce in Tombstone flourished alongside silver mining, and the city rapidly developed sophisticated commercial infrastructure to supply a rapidly growing population that included miners, merchants, professionals, and families drawn by the promise of prosperity. The last photograph of Buffalo Bill Cody, taken 6 days before his death at Glenwood Springs on January 4, 1917. Cody had gone to Glenwood Springs to recover his failing health. His world-famous Wild West show had gone bankrupt, and the great showman died without the fortune he had once accumulated through decades of performance. Some of Pancho Villa's bandits captured by American troops after the raid on Columbus, New Mexico, in March 1916. Villa's incursion into American territory, which killed 18 Americans, provoked the punitive expedition led by General John Pershing, who spent months pursuing Villa through northern Mexico without ever capturing him. A young Ute man photographed at Navajo Springs, Arizona, between 1893 and 1903. The Ute people, who inhabited the Rocky Mountains and Colorado Plateau, were progressively confined to reservations during the second half of the 19th century, losing the vast majority of their ancestral lands to American colonial expansion. A man riding an elk in Sheridan, Wyoming, around 1910. This unusual and good-humored image reveals the playful side of life in the American West. Sheridan, located in northern Wyoming near the Bighorn Mountains, was a prosperous town driven by ranching and trade with surrounding indigenous communities. On October 31, 1864, the United States Congress rapidly admitted Nevada as the 36th state of the Union during the Civil War. The quick admission was tied to political needs and the silver ore found in Nevada, which President Lincoln needed to help finance the Union's war effort against the Confederate States. A chuck wagon and its cook, essential elements on the long cattle drives of the Wild West. The chuck wagon, invented by rancher Charles Goodnight in 1866, revolutionized cattle drives by creating a mobile kitchen system that provided regular meals to cowboys during weeks of continuous travel across the open range. The Twin Buttes near Green River City, Wyoming, photographed in 1872 by a Pacific Survey expedition photographer. Green River City was a departure point for Western expeditions and an important transcontinental railroad station. The twin rock formations were natural landmarks that served as reference points for travelers for generations. The gold town of Deadwood, in the Dakota Territory, around 1878, when the gold rush was at its peak. Founded illegally on Lakota lands guaranteed by the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, Deadwood was an explosion of intense life where fortunes were made and lost in a matter of days or even hours in saloons and mining claims. Photograph of an unidentified man holding a firearm of unknown model, published with the question, "Does anyone know what gun he is carrying?" This image exemplifies the growing historical interest in precisely identifying weapons used in the Wild West, a specialized field of American firearms history that attracts passionate researchers. Chief Plenty Coups of the Crow represented all Native American nations at the dedication ceremony of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier on November 11, 1921. Aliez Kaash, his Crow name, had guided his people through cooperation with Americans as a survival strategy during decades of increasing pressure and land dispossession. View of 5 miners and their dog in a log cabin with a sod roof in Colorado around the 1890s. This everyday image captures the modest and austere conditions in which miners lived in the mountains. Log and sod cabins were common structures at the high altitudes of the Rocky Mountains during the mining boom era. Alice Squirreltooth was a saloon dancer in Dodge City and other Wild West towns in the 1870s, who later became one of the first female photographers in Arizona. Her unusual trajectory, from saloon dancer to pioneering photographer, exemplifies the unique possibilities the American West sometimes offered to unconventional women. The 4th most popular post on the Wild West Pics subreddit in 2025 features the iconic photograph of Calamity Jane in Deadwood, South Dakota, around 1876. Martha Jane Canary, in men's clothing and with a defiant stance, became one of the most enduring symbols of female freedom in the American Wild West. The daughters of Cheyenne Chief American Horse, photographed in 1901 in Billings, Montana, by L.A. Huffman. American Horse was one of the most influential Oglala Sioux leaders of the late 19th century, participating in crucial negotiations with the American government following the military defeat of Plains peoples. The Ghost Dance, photographed in the autumn of 1890. The Ghost Dance movement was a spiritual practice that promised the restoration of the indigenous world and the disappearance of white settlers. The U.S. government viewed it as threatening, and its suppression culminated in the brutal massacre at Wounded Knee in December 1890. African-American cowboys at the Negro State Fair in Bonham, Texas, in 1911. It is estimated that between 1/5 and 1/3 of all Wild West cowboys were black. Despite their essential contribution to American ranching culture, black cowboys were systematically erased from the popular history of the American West. The Shade Saloon in Fort Jones, California, around 1910. Fort Jones was a small town in Siskiyou County in Northern California, a region that had its own gold rush in the 1850s. The Shade Saloon was one of the establishments that maintained social life in isolated rural communities far from larger frontier towns. Interior of the Concordia Saloon in Santa Barbara, California, in 1880. The Concordia reflects the style of late 19th century Californian saloons, with its carved wood bar and lined bottles. Santa Barbara maintained a certain Spanish elegance that distinguished it from the rougher towns of the interior Wild West. Martha Calamity Jane Canary Burke posed in front of a teepee display before a performance with the Indian Congress at the Pan American Exposition of 1901. Calamity Jane had become a popular celebrity. Her life, a blend of fact and legend, transformed into spectacle for the entertainment of Eastern urban audiences. Tom Horn braiding a rope in the Laramie County Jail office in Cheyenne in 1902. Horn was a former Army scout and Pinkerton detective who became a hired killer for cattlemen. He was convicted of killing a 14-year-old boy and hanged in November 1903 in Cheyenne, Wyoming, in one of the era's most controversial executions, the main street of Tombstone, Arizona, around the 1880s. This photograph captures the town at its peak after the OK Corral gunfight and before the decline caused by mine flooding and falling silver prices. Tombstone was one of the richest and most vibrant towns of the American Southwest during this remarkable period. Nellie Tall Youth Standing Bear, a Stone Sioux woman from Montana in traditional dress. This photograph belongs to the remarkable collection of portraits of indigenous women from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, which document with beauty and dignity the cultural diversity and strength of Native American nations. Outlaw Kid Curry with his girlfriend Annie Rogers around 1898 to 1901. Harvey Logan, Kid Curry's real name, was considered the most dangerous member of Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch, being responsible for most of the killings committed by the group during their bank and train robberies across the American West. On December 23, 1880, Sheriff Pat Garrett and his posse captured Billy the Kid and the Regulators in a stone cabin at Stinking Springs, New Mexico. The Kid was tried and sentenced to death, but escaped from the Lincoln County Courthouse. He was finally shot by Garrett at Fort Sumner in July 1881. The deep ties of the Ute people with Utah, the Rocky Mountains, and the Colorado Plateau are testament to their enduring legacy. The Ute inhabited these lands for over 1,000 years before European contact. The name Utah itself derives from the Apache word Utahi, meaning people of the mountains, referring to the Ute people. Soldiers of the 8th U.S. Cavalry Regiment and 3rd Infantry participate in the Great Indian Grass Dance at the reservation in South Dakota around 1890. The presence of soldiers at this indigenous cultural event reflects the tense relations between the American Army and Native nations during the turbulent post-Little Bighorn period. Soldier Frank L. Schmid joined the Texas Rangers in 1886 and was serving in Company D when he was shot in the line of duty. The Texas Rangers were the first state police force in Texas, founded in 1823. Throughout their history, they combined law enforcement with border protection under extremely demanding frontier conditions. East side of the Plaza in Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1866. Santa Fe is the oldest capital city in the United States, founded by the Spanish in 1610. The Central Plaza has always been the heart of the city's social and commercial life, where diverse cultures mingled: Native Americans, Hispanics, Eastern merchants, and American troops. Taft, Montana, known in its time as the most wicked city in America. Founded as a workers' camp during the construction of the Milner Railroad Tunnel, Taft attracted prostitutes, gamblers, and criminals of every variety. In 1910, a fire destroyed much of the town, ending its brief and violent existence as a frontier boomtown. Texas Rangers John Woodard Wood Saunders, at left, and J. Walter Durbin dedicated their lives to law enforcement in Texas. The Rangers were known for their relentless determination and their unofficial motto that one riot required only one Ranger to handle the situation. Many died in the line of duty across the dangerous frontier.